welcome to Holy Land Uncovered. I'm Emily Francis. Thank you so much for joining us. In July, a group of inspiring African-American Christian women and female religious, spiritual, and social leaders came on a once-in-a-lifetime trip to the Holy Land. A delegation of more than 100 African-American women, thought leaders, religious leaders, spiritual leaders, came on a very important Women of the Bible mission here to Israel, to the Holy Land, while also celebrating the work of Martin Luther King and Dr. Coretta King, who has a whole forest dedicated to her. I caught up with the group as they arrived their first day, and we took a tour of Jaffa. And we're so happy now to be joined by two very special people, a real power couple. We've got Charles and Kathleen Steele here of the SCLC, and you are the First Lady. Explain, you're the First Lady of the Coretta King. Explain.
Well, I'm the First Lady of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, co-founded by Dr. Martin Luther King. So I sit in Coretta King's position when she was married to Dr. King before he passed away.
This journey find you, or you found it?
Well, first of all, I found my wife before I became president. I'm a former state senator out of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I'm the first black state senators from Tuscaloosa since Reconstruction. People were saying SCLC has outlived its time. This is Dr. King's organization, outlived its time. So they called on me to come to Atlanta to resign my Senate seat and to restructure and build SCLC. That was 17 and a half years ago, and we're still there.
Wow, 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 wow. So for you, explain, for you to be the First Lady and to follow, in the, the legacy of Coretta King, obviously we know that behind every great man is always a great woman, whether we say this out loud or not. Explain to us, A, what it means to fill her shoes, and really the influence that Coretta King had that maybe a lot of us don't know about.
Well, I knew Coretta before, after Dr. King, of course, had passed away. And I met her because my husband would always sponsor her family reunions in Tuscaloosa at the college, that's Stillman College. And she was just a most wonderful person.
In a profound way, Martin Luther King continues the struggle for peace and understanding between men and nations more powerfully in death than in life. For his spirit has been loosed upon a violent and loveless world.
You just would not imagine how nice she was. And of course, Israel was one of her issues. She loved Israel. And she talked about Israel, and she really pushed Dr. King to look into what was happening in Israel. And so that's what got his interest in Israel.
I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land.
Dr. King was such an inspiration. What Dr. King meant to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and my wife and I, is that he listened very well. People didn't know that about Dr. King. Dr. King was a great listener. What Dr. King would do, let them exert themselves and explain themselves, and he just sit back very quietly. And at the end, he said, I see what you were saying, but this is what we need to do. And wow, that was so impactful in his negotiations.
Wow.
And with my wife working with Coretta King, we were very close to her.
The challenge to international understanding which we now face is at once a challenge between nations and a challenge within nations.
Explain her connection to Israel and how that influenced her husband.
Well, she basically just had passion for Israel. And so she did not like what was happening to some of the Israelis. And she looked at what blacks had been through in America. So she looked at slavery, and then she looked at what had happened with the Holocaust. And she just said, look, we have something in common.
I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
In the end, the Promised Land speech, was he trying to come to Israel before he died? Was he going to come to Israel? Yeah, she came, but he didn't?
He was going to come. He was making plans to come. And that's when I came here early 2000, when Prime Minister Ariel Sharon was the prime minister. And I brought 35 people with me. And it was because I was curious about Dr. King wanted to bring 5,000 African Americans to Israel. And in talking to Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, I committed to him that at some point we will fulfill that dream, that vision that Dr. King had to bring African Americans and Israel together, because it was a common bond. And that's who supported Dr. King for many of years during his struggle. Dr. King was not only a pastor, preacher, leader of SCLC. I'm in his position. I know what it takes. It takes money. Civil rights is a resourceful movement, but it's also a business institution. And most religious leaders don't understand that. But Dr. King did. People say, oh, he was a great leader. He gave great speeches. But that wasn't his priority.
And I think this will be the only way that the Negro community and the allies in the white community will be able to bring these issues out in the open so that the communities involved will not be able to ignore the problem.
Discrimination and what black people were going through in terms of the similarity of the Holocaust is very similar. So Dr. King was a fundraiser. And who did he depend on for the money? The Jews, Israel, American Jews, Jews throughout the world. That's how he was able to fund the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
King, do we believe that he's a prophet? Do we believe that Martin Luther King is an eternal soul and he's here pulling some strings? As a religious person, we can say this, right?
Absolutely.
Spiritual.
Well, I don't know if he was a prophet or not, but I do know and I do believe that it is important to teach our history. Your history, history of the Jews, history of the African Americans, because I think if people know their history, they will do better. To me, the Jewish people and African Americans share a history that's molded together. You may look at it a little bit different, but it was the same thing. It was the same thing. Jews were mistreated. African Americans were slaves, and they were mistreated. The Holocaust was terrible. It should never have happened. We need to know our history. And the worst thing that America could do is to not allow teachers to teach history, because it is what it is. We cannot change it, but we can do better in the future.
Thank you both so much. It is such a distinct pleasure to be here and to be part of your incredible journey, and I'm so honored to meet you. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so happy to be joined right now by Dr. Ruth Smith of the Light of the World. Finish the rest of it.
Christian Tabernacle International from Stockbridge, Georgia, USA.
Wow, that's a big title, and you're not only that, but you are also a bishop above a bishop.
Yes. So yes, I'm the first female to be confirmed as an archbishop in religion, not just the Christian church, but in any church.
We worship you, our Lord.
The vision of our ministry is to see a world without darkness. How we do that? One person at a time. Every time I shine the light and somebody's heart's open to Jesus Christ, we just dispel darkness, and one person at a time. So the Bible says as the word get darker, the light become more empowered and more intense, and you can just see that.
We're going to take a short break, but please don't go anywhere. When we come back, we have much more with our very special group of African American women visiting the Holy Land from Israel, and we're going to continue on this very inspirational tour. So don't go anywhere.
My late husband and I had a church here in Israel. Israel is dear to my heart, so I have the Israeli flag hanging in our church.
In your opinion, why is Israel so special? Why is it so important for you to be here right now and take this message back? Because we know that the narrative in the United States right now in all realms is not exactly smooth sailing.
Yes, well, you know, the thing about it is, you know, Israel was chosen to bring the Messiah through, and they did their job. The Messiah is here. And now we're all in that place where the Messiah is here, and he's waiting for us to accept him. So I come to bring the message here and to take the message back.
So Dr. Ruth, explain, if you would, why it is so important in these messianic times that we also understand the historic connection between the Jewish people and the African American people.
Yes, and because, of course, historically, both of us came out of oppression. And that oppression always changes the DNA in people. I don't know whether people understand or not, but when you go through a traumatic experience, it literally changes the DNA in your brain. And so the Hebrew people, along with the African Americans, both went through some major trauma. And that's why there's such a connection already.
Let us march on till victory is won.
That polarization also caused people to get out of their sleep and slumber. The Bible talks about how there'll be a message of there's peace, 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 and all of a sudden it became chaos.
Everyone gets lazy.
Yeah, and so the polarization has its place because it's truth or it's not truth. And another thing that's true, what is truth would never become a lie, and what is a lie would never become the truth. So all we have to do is be true to ourselves, and we see the world through the mirror of our own hearts.
For young generations of African Americans to understand the history and the positive history between the Jewish people, not only in ancient times, but even now, even in civil rights. A lot of people don't know that. Could you share that as an African American woman?
Well, first of all, one of my best friends in my first job was a Jewish girl. And we were just close. I didn't understand any of this then, but we were just close. And I realized in hindsight that we just had a lot of commonality in spirit. But the reason it's so important is because life goes in cycles. And in every generation, there has to be a Moses, a Joshua. Someone has to take that mantle and be that forefront person. And every generation has one, or two, or three, or whatever. But there's always somebody in every generation that God will put his hands on to carry this mantle. This Christianity ain't going nowhere. The Jewish people ain't going nowhere. This thing is set from God, and can't no devil kill it. I see the hope of Christ, and I'm excited about every day I wake up. Whether I wake up in Israel or someplace on the continent of Africa or one of the islands or at home in the U.S., wherever I wake up with one goal, and that is to see a world without darkness. And my core values is light, love, integrity, generosity, holiness, and teamwork.
There's no question that the United States is at a critical juncture right now in all aspects of life. Ethnically, religiously, racially, spiritually, economically, all aspects of life. But is rewriting history about America's dark past the way forward? Well, I sat down with many African American women of valor on this trip in the Holy Land who explained why faith is the only way forward to reach the next generation of African Americans. I'm also happy to be joined by another wonderful, inspirational woman, Dr. Bishop Coretta Vaughn from Detroit. And it's been so fun hanging out with you at Simon and Tanner's house.
Like I've known you forever.
I feel the same.
It's a joy. It's a joy. Thank you.
Tell us about your ministry. I know you're from Detroit. Tell us about it.
So I am the senior pastor of the Holy Ghost Cathedral in Detroit, but I'm the presiding bishop of Go Tell It Ministry Worldwide Network of Churches. And this is like my 51st 41st year in ministry. Just celebrated 50.
You're only 40 years old.
I started at 1 year old. And so I've gone around the world and 5 continents, 40 nations, preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ.
The contagious Christian's faith is infectious.
So I'm really privileged to be back. This is my 2nd trip in the land that we call holy, but I'm so honored to be here.
Where are you most excited to go? And you said the wall. You know, you're going everywhere all over the Galilee. Why the wall? Why did that move you so much the first time?
The Western Wall is an amazing place. I believe it's the presence of God.
Amen.
But when we got to the wall, it was a very different moment. It changed my life.
How
It
so?
changed the trajectory of my life. Number one, my perspective of Jewish people and their devotional life with God. Because when you get down to the wall and you see the women praying, their prayer books, and they're rocking, and they're at the wall with their face to the wall. And on the other side, of course, is the men, they're praying as well. There's a sound that's there that is authentically God.
I mean, everywhere is in a dark place because this is all the messianic, and this is all part of what was prophesied that this time is polarization, and that's where the light comes in. But explain why it is so important to also explain to young people that are losing hope that God is real, that this is God, because I think a lot of people are losing faith. And rightly so. We're seeing people shooting up schools. We're seeing homeless people, all of that. How do we convince people that to still follow the path and that God is there?
You know, God has been God for eons. So we don't have to prove that God is still God, because he's continued to prove that for himself. You think about it. You think about what our nation is going through back home. You think about what this nation is going through. And believe it or not, young people, Gen Z, is very attuned to God and spirituality. In spite of the rap, in spite of the murders, in spite of the drugs, there is a hunger in that young generation for God.
It's a rare condition this day and age to read any good news on the newspaper page.
Now it's our job to show them authentically who God is, and not to confuse it with the Illuminati, not confuse it with fame, not confuse it with wealth. And so I believe that the people of God, post-COVID, are now saying we need to communicate clearer, in a more relevant way, and we're using technology and social media to get to that generation. And they're really believing it. They're coming on strong. There are so many young people who are now turning their life to God because they've tried everything else and it doesn't work. And so this is a great time for 100 women to be in the land that's holy, so that we can go back fired up and reinvigorated to save young women and young boys again.
I have received the promised Holy Spirit, and all curses over my life are broken.
Look how much has happened for African Americans in the past 100 years. What's your message to that? Slavery has existed since the beginning of time. It ended in the United States.
However, it hasn't ended for everybody. I think it is systemic as well. It's governmental, it's political, it's financial, it's economic, it's educational. It has not ended for everybody. I'm an elected school board official, and I am a school board member of 52,000 children, the largest school district in the state of Michigan. And it is predominantly African American and Hispanic. But if I were to tell you and show you economically what each pupil gets per child for funding their education versus what is taking place in the suburbs, you would see slavery has not ended. So yes, it has ended politically, but it does still exist systemically. So now that's where God comes in, and we have to share with them that in God there is no slavery. In God there is no racism, there is no sexism. So we bring you to God to free your mind, and then you can change the world. I'm telling you, when you get 100 women of the Bible to see what they're going to see, some of them have never been here before. Give us a year. I guarantee you, You'll hear noise from America about how other bonds of darkness, other bonds of social injustice is going to come off. And it's because you guys have invited us here. Thank you so much.
Changing the world, baby.
Listen, we changing
I gotta
the
give you a
world.
hug. Thank you.
We're changing the world.
Very happy to once again be joined by another incredible woman who is on this trip, Apostle Elaine Benson of Houston, Texas. Hello and welcome to Israel with this beautiful view right off of the airplane.
Yes, I am super excited about being here. Have always wanted to come to Israel, and so this was such an opportunity to come.
So this is your first time?
This is my first time.
So what do you think so far? You went straight from the airport to Jaffa. It's 100 degrees and humidity. That's like being in Houston, Texas.
It's exactly like being in Houston, Texas, because we're really used to a lot of hot weather, and so therefore it was kind of like home. And I love the way they said, welcome home. Aww. And I really feel that. I really do. I do.
Can you put it into words, what that feeling is?
Because we've always heard, walk where Jesus walked. Be in the places where Jesus was. And because of the word of God that's on the inside, I mean, I feel that place of home.
Y'all remember when he jumped and he started walking on the water? Remember when he did that? But this time, when he saw it and he recognized it was Jesus, he jumped in the water.
Tell us about your ministry and why your work is so important to you.
I am the founder of First Fruits Christian Center. It's a church, a non-denominational church in Houston, Texas, and it was founded by my husband and I in 1986. My husband passed away. And because of that, even now, it has become more important for me because I've seen young people really come forth and give their lives to the Lord. I've seen our community come together. I've seen so many things that God has done through the ministry. We're a ministry that reaches into the community. When I think of Israel and I think of what you are doing here, it's such a community. The church for me is that. It's the community of people coming together and doing a work. And the work that we're doing is really reaching lives and changing lives for the better.
Fill me up, God. Fill me up. Fill me up.
We've gone through COVID. George Floyd. How do you give people hope that there is something positive possible?
Yes, because the culture has changed tremendously. I mean, we see that. And so therefore, so many have gone away from the Lord. They're not coming back even after COVID. And so we targeted our young people even before COVID. And so therefore, we are seeing them take the gospel and really spread it and really take it to another level, really. And so therefore, they are influencing their friends. If we don't change the individual, we won't change the culture. I believe that oneness is going to come, so that we can see the Messiah come back.
Thank you so much. You're amazing.
Absolutely,
thank you.
Absolutely. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you so much for watching our special episode of Holy Land Uncovered, getting to know these special female African-American spiritual leaders and why this trip to Israel is one that they will never forget.